Welcome to episode 3 of ChordCast. I'm Lucy and I'm a co-president of the Churchill Musicians Club.
And I'm Andy, the other co-president of the Churchill Musicians Club.
And as always, we're very excited that you guys are joining us on this episode to learn more about the experiences of professional musicians.
Today, our guest is Max Liu, who is a junior at Columbia University who studies music composition and computer science. He's also part of the Columbia-Juilliard exchange program and was an NYU USA composer apprentice in the summer of 2021. Would you like to introduce yourself before we begin?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a junior at Columbia, and I started writing music like in high school, just interested in different kinds of like film musics and like aesthetics and the way I can work around those. And I guess yeah, music is a big part of who I am. So it's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So you've partially addressed this already, but our first question is like how you got started with music composition. And for those people who don't know, like what's your compositional process?
Yeah, so honestly, the first thing that got me into like writing music was more like I didn't really like doing like competitive piano, and like I kind of got turned off to that just from like always playing pieces I didn't really like. And so after like breaking away from that, I found that it was more interesting to me to like analyze pieces I did like. So that like at the time started from like impressionist composers and like early 20th century, and then over time it developed to like different kinds of voices from the modern day and like film music and stuff like that in particular. I'd say like compositional process wise, it really has to do with like being interested in something, whether it's compositional technique or a specific kind of aesthetic or just like some kind of concept in general. Like it starts from some kind of like interest that you want to explore, and then from there you kind of have to build your voice from the ground up.
Awesome. So kind of connecting to the next question, what are you inspired by when you write music, whether it's like other composers or just other media or different concepts?
Yeah, I think like you really can be inspired by anything. A lot of times, you know, there's some kind of like concept that you want to explore. Sometimes there's like electroacoustic techniques and things that inform different like writing styles. And like sometimes it's just other composers and other work and stuff. But like, you know, anything you read, anything you experience, or like any kind of concept you study can be a kind of grounds to build up a new musical idea. So
cool. Are there any favorite composers that you've studied from?
Yeah, like a lot of what I got interested in over the last 2 years had to do with kind of like the modern spectral field, where composers use a lot of like acoustic phenomenon. So specifically like Tristan Morel, Kaya Soriaho, Georg Haas. Those are all really good composers that kind of explore physics and the way it works with music, and that also has a lot to do with like electroacoustic phenomenon and different kinds of like analyses of sound. Other than that, some good names are like George Crumb, Henry Dutilleux. There's a lot of composers. I can go on forever. So
Yeah, all of these composers that you just mentioned, I really like them a lot. And I'm also like really inspired by their music. So the next question will be like really relevant to like a lot of high school musicians who want to major in music. What's a typical day like studying music and computer science at the collegiate level, and what classes do you take both inside and outside of music?
Yeah, so like I think the biggest thing is that you have to make sacrifices. And so like I think like there's some video on YouTube where it's like you can choose between like socializing, getting good grades, and like getting sleep or something like that, and you usually get 2 out of the 3. So especially when you're thinking of balancing 2 different subjects together, it ends up being like, you know, you can't focus yourself 100% on one or the other at any time without giving up something. And that's like the biggest thing you you have to recognize to be able to succeed, especially in a place like here where there's also a lot of like core requirements and a lot of like gen eds and stuff you have to get through, is like you really have to like allocate your time. And so when like recruiting season is going on, I'm spending a lot more time doing different kinds of like CS work. And when I have like a deadline or commission work deadline coming up, then that's when I'll really grind out music. And I think that's like the best way to succeed in studying both. And so like your typical day is whatever you allocate, whatever you need to do, get done for the day.
Are there any specific classes that you really enjoyed taking as a comp sci or a music major?
Yeah. Well, so I think for like the comp sci curriculum in general, it's pretty standard between different schools. There's just like a standard set of knowledge that you need to figure out. I do find that like the higher you get into the courses, the more interesting they become. So once you get past like general kinds of like data structures and like theory and stuff like that with CS, then you can get into more kinds of interesting like algorithmic topics and stuff. There is like computational sound classes that are pretty interesting. So currently I'm in it's like signal processing related to like computational sound and stuff. And it's a pretty interesting class where you go into like frequency modulation and electronics and how they kind of inform music. It's pretty cool. Other than that, you just composition courses in general are pretty nice. You usually get to write for people. So those are some of my favorite classes to be in.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Andy, you kind of like rephrased my next question, but so now that you're also starting the BA and MM program at the Juilliard and Columbia Exchange, how do you plan to balance all your work? Because I know a lot of seniors, especially ones who are like in orchestra and stuff, they also want to double major or something similar in college. So do you have any advice on like balancing?
Yeah, well, so the thing about the BA/MM program is that you basically have to be done at Columbia by your third year to be in it. So I'm not actually currently like planning on doing that program. I'm just taking lessons and being in the Juilliard Exchange. So I'm taking lessons, but I'm not pursuing a degree at Juilliard. But to like succeed in that program, you definitely have to plan from very early on to like know exactly what you're going to do, since you need basically all of your requirements at Columbia to be done by your third year. And then you're like a master's student at Juilliard for 2 years, like you would normally. And just like, yeah, in general, you have to have things pretty planned out. And that's also usually sometimes that's not good accommodating for like the position you're in, especially if you're trying to tackle different subjects. Like most people in the master's music program like have a very clear set goal, and like there's a very specific reason you get a master's in music, and it's not to just work like a normal job, right? If you're committing to a master's in music, then you have some kind of clear aspiration and clear cut goal, and there's a reason why you're allocating like your degree towards music and not something else. And that's like something to acknowledge about double majoring, is that it's very easy to say you're going to double major, but actually doing it is something that you have to end up evaluating whether it's worth it for you. Because if you're not going to pursue any kind of career in music, then is there really a reason to? Or can you find other ways to satisfy your musical urges just through like participating in groups at school or writing music in other ways or things like that? It's a good thing to balance.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I think I've kind of thought of that also, because I'm also double majoring in most schools, but I guess at some point I have to make a decision. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I also found that really helpful and really like kind of insightful, because like in a lot of schools that I'm applying as well, I'm also thinking of like either double majoring or minoring in music, and I know eventually I'll have to like sacrifice one for the other. And even if I don't choose to, it's going to be really hard for me to like get good composition lessons if I don't explicitly like major in music. At least.
Yeah, well, so it's not that it's impossible to do music and other things, and there are people who have like chosen careers in other fields and have gone back to do things like music. I mean, a good example is like Ives, who was like an insurance broker or something at the
Yep.
same, like,
Mhm.
it's not impossible, but once you get into like the meat of actually like how you're allocating your credits and like which courses are you taking and how are you going to graduate on time,
Mhm.
that's when it becomes important to clearly set like what your goals are for this. Like, am I actually going to pursue a career in music? And like what is most important, what experiences in music are most important to me that I'll like sacrifice other time for, right? Um yeah.
Thank you. That was
Mhm.
insightful. So our next question is going to be NYO, about NYO. Since you were a composer apprentice in the summer of 2021, would you like to like share an experience about what that was like?
Yeah, NY is a great program. It's great because it's like equal opportunity. You go for free, it's open to everybody, and like it's a great place where you meet like a lot of different people from different backgrounds. And like it's also just like they do a lot to like give you a good solid musical experience. And there's people there who like don't do other summer music festivals, and there's other people there who do music festivals every year. So it's definitely like I think probably like the best music program I've ever done. I mean, I haven't done a ton, but definitely like it's definitely a good experience that like anybody who like wants to like or who's considering like being a musician and doing it like a it's like not easy either, right?
Mhm.
It's pretty intense. You like it's like rehearsal all day stuff for like a month, right?
Mhm.
Um, so pressure's on, but it's definitely like it's a really good learning experience. And like for composers specifically, like
Mhm.
one of the biggest things you always have to tackle is communicating to performers like what your work is
Yeah.
intended to do. Like it's really easy to like get in your brain really hard about like, oh, I want it to be like this crazy interest, like some crazy technique, or like I want it to look like this, and I want there to be like like crazy polyrhythms everywhere and stuff. But it's like at the end of the day, you're not communicating that work.
Mhm.
It's not you're not communicating with the audience directly. You're communicating to a set of performers that have to like understand your work. So then it's like a big thing you learn is to talk to people who like don't look at these kinds of techniques and things very often, and to like evaluate what is the best way to communicate to the performers, not to like yourself or not to the audience, but like to the people who are actually going to realize your work. It's really important in that sense when you're working with any kind of performer to like the most important thing should be that your score is easy to read and clear and neat, and there's like as few like mistakes as possible. Like that's what's going to make the life of a performer way easier, and that's what's going to make people want to actually play your music.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best things you learn from just working with live performers who like are also students and like don't feel obligated to play your music, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
I've had
Like the
pretty
oh,
much.
sorry.
Why don't you go first, Lucy?
I was gonna say like just like the one time I've had anyone play my music and I was also there to like talk to them. I think it was just like a like eye-opening because at the end of the day you're writing music probably for people to play and not just to like have it look fancy on the paper.
Yeah.
So I think experiences like that are really
And
insightful.
there's definitely like everything you do that's hard to read or anything you do that's like extremely hard to play there has to be a clear reason why, because
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
there isn't, like nobody's going to want to do it. And like that's kind of I think a big thing is to look at your score from the side of like a conductor and to like analyze it that way. Like, is this easy to read? And then also like, can I see what the point is in every single note that's there? And that's, it's like one thing that happens a lot with especially orchestra readings is that you like miss like a single rest on the score in like the bassoon two part or something, and then the performer like asks the conductor like, oh, what's going on, why do I have like no rest in my part, or like why is like a note missing or something like that, and then it takes like 2 hours for them to figure it out, and then they don't actually rehearse the piece, right? And that's like also the importance of engraving, is that like you're basically also a graphic designer, and like everything you mess up like takes away rehearsal time from like actually making the piece better. So that's how it is.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience where I I've had my piece rehearsed by orchestral musicians. It was at Brevard. Like I went to Brevard last summer, and literally like half the lessons were about making your score look good or like engraving in general. And I think it's like one of those things that a lot of composers kind of just sweep under the rug. But as you said, rehearsal time is precious, right? And it can take hours to like correct like one tiny thing in the score. So like,
Yeah, or like the also the thing is just like when you're the composer getting the reading, you usually get like an hour maybe of
Mhm.
rehearsal, and they'll spend like an hour every day doing Tchaikovsky, but your piece will get an hour total. And that's just how reality is. So every
Yeah.
second you can save by like spending more time making the score look good
Mhm.
is like, that's it'll make your recordings better. And but I mean in general, like I guess like even like farther away from that is just like in general, like it's good to perceive your music as like something that's meant to be performed and not just like, oh, I want to like explore this and like make things look fancy and like sound good on the computer.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think since I'm also like, I also play violin in the orchestra, I started imagining like if someone handed me the violin part, like how would I react? But also building off of this question, I think you also play piano and violin, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so how did you get familiar with other instruments that you don't play, like for example, winds and brass, and how to like write well for those? Because I'm like honestly still struggling with that.
Yeah, well, so the only real way to learn is to experience, is like to hear it live, right? The real way you learn is like the more times you hear pieces played by like wind instruments or brass instruments and stuff, the more you realize like what actually everything sounds like. But like obviously like nobody you can't have that every single day. So I mean I have a textbook that I read in like high school, which like that I didn't really enjoy it that much, but it's like a way to get the basics of everything. It's like Samuel Adler. It's
Oh,
a
it's
pretty
Oh wow,
standard.
wait, I
It's
have
a
it right here. It's literally
yeah,
like next to my desk.
yeah.
yeah, it's a pretty standard textbook.
Mhm.
But I think actually the better way to learn is to listen to pieces, like listen to the Rite of Spring with the score, and then every single woodwind solo like teaches you a different instrument. Like if you've ever heard like an A clarinet versus like an English horn versus like a B flat clarinet versus whatever, like that orchestra literally has like quintuple winds. Like you'll never hear a piece that big written today, but these scores online are all references and like if you ever wanted to know what a bassoon sounds like in the highest register that I can play, right? It's like the first 30 seconds of the piece. Um, and so like to get familiar with other instruments, you basically have to, I mean, it is like a lot of just work. Like you have to know the range. I mean, the easy things are like you can know what the range are, you can know what it sounds like at different ranges. The harder parts are like knowing canonical techniques. Like this is especially true with strings, is that like if you're not a string player, like it's really hard to get a sense for what like a canonical string part sounds like
Mhm.
unless you've like dug through like the Bach partitas and all the technique. And like if you've like played the standard string technique, it's easy to write like string parts. But if you haven't, I imagine it's hard to get a grasp for what's comfortable with like your fingerings and stuff. And like that's part of what you have to do with winds too, is talk to the players, and like percussion specifically is also really important. Like your best friends are percussionists because they really like new music usually. And also they're really open to showing you how things actually work and like what's possible. So like the percussion, listening to like cool new music percussion parts is like a really like interesting thing you can do to like get familiar with what's possible.
Yeah, that's cool. I have like a similar experience since I'm not a string player. When I write, I find it really hard to write string parts, especially in the orchestral piece that I had read at Brevard. I had a lot of like really kind of high string parts that in a 30-minute reading they kind of struggle to find like the exact notes. So I guess all of that was a learning experience for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing is like like if you understand what like first position to third position is on the strings, then it's like
Mhm.
easier because most people can sight read there. But usually when you have anything that like requires like a lot of string crossings or things that are like higher up on different strings and like can't be played like in a standard way, it's like usually like it takes like a practice room and like a couple, at least like a practice session or two to like
Mhm.
have a good fingering for it. Like if they're not going to work with a string coach on fingerings beforehand, then it's like, it's a little bit prohibitive to do like crazy things with the strings, unless you're working with like LA Phil or something. Then you're fine.
Awesome. Okay, do you have any advice for high schoolers wanting to study music in college other than like what you just said? Like maybe, for example, preparing your art supplements like both of us are doing right now. It's kind of stressful.
I mean, as composers, your art supplements are probably like the easiest part of your application, right? Since you just put your scores in your recording, if that's how I remember correctly. I mean, I think like in just the college application process, I'd be careful of like tropes, especially related to your essays and stuff. Like so many people write like like I didn't like music, but now I do essay, or like like it's like this, it's like the same essay, right? You can think of all the essays that people write about music, and like I think to make it work as an essay, you need like your own addition to it, right? And like composing on its own is interesting because it's not specifically like what everybody else writes about, but just in general, like be careful of like there's so many orchestral students like throughout the nation, and a lot of them are going to be really accomplished. So it's good to make sure you're framing music in like a personable way, and like throughout the rest of your application, whether you're applying to be a musician or not. Like if you're going to mention music in your application, make it something that's like unique to you. I guess like I wrote my essay about music, but it was more about like my perspective on how music works, and like how like developing that perspective is like important to like composition, but also just like other, like I think you definitely have to add some kind of unique aspect to it, because just like it's like the same as like the athlete that writes like the I was like a football captain essay. It's like every high school has a football captain, so there has to be something specific that you want to tell. And I think that's also just like it's like a good metaphor for just how you approach like music, or just like any kind of thing you're creating, is like while you're making it, while you're writing an essay, or while you're doing anything, like think about what the purpose of it is, or like what exactly you're trying to obtain, and then that'll help you with your art supplements. It'll help you with whatever. Like I mean, for composers, you just put your best works down, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, is there like a strategic way, because some of the schools like they let you put like 2 files, so like is there a strategic way to choosing your best scores?
I mean, for me, it was pretty clear to me which scores were my best scores. I would say like having recordings of your music is a big plus. Like if I were to judge like music in a portfolio, I would very, very much rather hear a recording of a piece than like a MIDI file. And so like if that's possible, like obviously it's not possible for a lot of high schoolers, and also like even like a lot of the Juilliard undergrads who like gave like new student presentations, a lot of them were also like MIDI mock-ups. But I think what might actually also be helpful is like good MIDI mock-ups are better than like really shitty ones. Like if you can like pretty up your computerized audio a little bit, if you need to use computerized audio and you make it sound good, then that's way better than like just taking like a default kind of whatever out of your like notation software or something. But I'd say like pick the music you're most proud of, and then also music that you like might have recordings for, or might be able to have recordings for, and then you're probably fine.
A side question: do you have Note Performer, and what do you think of it, if you do?
I don't have Note Performer, and I don't know. I haven't really been like caught up with like performing like or like MIDI performing software, just because like I don't know. It's I'd rather not. I think it's also not necessarily good to rely too much on like the playback.
I get that. I don't have Note Performer either, although like every single composer has told me to get it. They're like, it's the best $100 you'll ever spend. It makes your pieces sound so realistic, and I'm like, I don't want to. Like,
I mean, I think the most realistic is to like have people play it, and then that's really realistic.
Kind of more of a personal question. What are some of your hobbies and interests? And like we know you're studying comp sci. how have you intersected that with music potentially, or like if do you plan to in the future?
Yeah, also, I mean, just hobbies wise, like it's like I like to go like to restaurants and like try different kinds of food and stuff. And like I don't know, I think like I guess like speaking from like the music side is like anything can really be like an inspiration to it. So like the big thing about having things to like finding like ideas to write for is like experiencing things that are like worth experiencing. And so that's like, you know, the more you live, the more you just like you see things that really interest you, or like you find something like aesthetically appealing about, you know, just like maybe like it's like a street in the city, or like some kind of experience that you have. And that's like a good way to inform your writing. And also just like, you know, there's ways that music can add things to your life besides just like, you know, it's like a two-way street. You don't just like, you're not just inspired by like things that inspire you to write music, but like you can do it the other way around too. And sorry, what was your other question again?
Oh, it's like since you're also studying comp sci,
Oh
have
yeah,
you intersected that with music?
yeah. I mean, in the same way, you kind of like, I mean, you can be inspired by like things you study in classes. I mean, like me being a student in Columbia College and not the engineering school, I also have to read a lot of stuff. So like I've used like Sappho lyrics in one of my pieces. I had like a quote from so what was the philosopher? It's like, you know, I've like quoted some philosophers and stuff in readings I've done that are interesting. And so in that way you find a lot of ways to use different like topics. One specific thing that I'm interested in is actually like algorithmic composition in specific. Like George Lewis, a professor at Columbia, has like a, I think it's some kind of like deep learning model that like improvises along to recordings and stuff. And there's a lot of interesting ways that like different deep learning models can like process sounds and like algorithms and stuff like that, and use it to have like these generative methods of new compositions. Um, if you've seen like Score Follower, their brain team actually took an open AI model, which like is like a language processing model, and like reworked it to kind of take like new composers' works and like morph them into its own compositions. And so there's a lot of interesting ways in which like AI is intersecting with music. And if you've seen like Dolly, which is also an OpenAI project, like it's very like it's all over social media now. It's like artists are like filling in their pictures with like it's like a neural network, and it like generates ways to fill in the image, and you can choose ones and they look really good. And I think like there's lots of generative models that are being built now to like solve problems in lots of different spaces, and that includes music.
So how would you say that your background influences or informs the music that you write? So this could include your identity, your experiences, your upbringing, like, or any other things that you consider to be like your background. I'm
Yeah,
purposely leaving this vague.
no, I get it. I think like specifically for my kind of music, I have never been like, I wouldn't say I'm like an avant-gardist. Like I don't necessarily try to create the most like cutting edge of sound or like different kinds of things, but I think I've always just had like there are very specific moments in different pieces that like really like that I really like. And it's like, you know, I'll listen to like a 10-minute piece for the 130-second chunk that I wish was longer. And that's kind of how I inform a lot of my writing, is like these are like amazing pieces and they're all very technically sound, but then it's like if I were to make this, it would like all be this like 30-second chunk, and this would be longer, and like I would extend things this way and the other way. And that's kind of how I really got interested in music in the first place. And so a lot of what I like is centered around taking like influences from like film and jazz harmony specifically, um, and communicating that through like more kind of modernist mediums that include things like more like spectral kinds of like bell harmonies and things like that. And in a way, I think that kind of ties everything together for me. It's just like in the end, I want to create products that are still familiar. I don't necessarily want to create products that are like totally out of the blue or like crazy, but then tie it down with like the specific things I was always interested in, which are like harmonic mediums and like overtones and like jazz harmony and stuff like that. I think that's like the biggest influence for me was in the past, like film music, and like I think that's something I want to get back into after like most of the composers here are very much more like into like a lot of my friends have like moved away from chords and like harmonies and stuff like that, and I think like that's more at the core and something I want to get back into after like taking dives in other schools of thought.
Awesome. And we're just curious, what is the latest thing you're working on?
So I recently had a orchestra piece I wrote for the ASU Philharmonia. That one I finished like this summer. I finished like at the beginning of this month, and like I did all the parts in like 2 days. So it was like terrible. It was like insane.
Yeah.
And then after that was like tech recruiting season. So now that's like a lot of coding and stuff, and it's like that's also terrible. But yeah, I finished that orchestra piece. It's like a lot easier than my last orchestra piece because it's for like student musicians as well. So that's currently being rehearsed, I think. And like, you know, I also that piece is much more kind of like harmonically simple, and I guess one thing I've been trying to do is like to make extended techniques less obvious. Like I don't really want to wear that kind of stuff on my sleeve, but rather have it be a kind of like effect that brings out specific aspects of the piece. And that's what I try to do with that piece.
Mhm.
I'm currently like editing an old piece I wrote, which was like an experiment, and I wanted to make it more coherent. And then I'm writing a piano piece and a viola piece, which are like slated for later this year or like next year, probably.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought of this question, but like, do you have any advice for how composers or like younger composers, like us, like we're not exactly professional, how to get our work performed? Do you just like search up a bunch of different
Yeah,
compositions?
so it's hard because if you're not like connected around like a network of musicians, then you don't really have a ton of opportunities to do it. But the best thing to do is to go to events where there are other musicians. Like if like people in your high school are not really open to performing, or like they're not really like super like into music, like something, like one of the big things is like festivals, and like pre-college composers who study at a pre-college, like for example like Peabody Prep or like Juilliard pre-college is a big one. They will always have resources and people who are performing, because like a lot of the performers also required to do new music pieces. And so like doing Summerfest, like doing NYO, like led me to actually, I worked with a lot more musicians there afterwards, because just like people there are interested in performing music. So that's doing summer festivals is one way. There are festivals for high schoolers and stuff. Other than that, like sometimes it's not easy. Like sometimes you just kind of like, you don't get to choose what you write for. A lot of times it's just like, you can always write a piano piece for yourself. You can always like, if you have some friends in music that, want to work on something chill, like maybe it doesn't have to be a terribly hard piece or something like, it doesn't have to be something like cutting edge or crazy, but just working with student musicians in general helps you a lot. Like you'll learn about just the mechanics of music, even if it's not like the most like high, like award-winning piece ever. It's like, you'll learn by just going through the process with people. And like, if you keep searching, you'll find it. Like, I don't think competitions are like the best way, because a lot of them don't perform your works anyways. And like, some of them are scams and stuff. As long as you're meeting people who like music, you'll find you can find ways to have your music performed. The hard thing is like, if you're like me and you only like writing for orchestra, and then it's like you have to beg people to play your music.
Yeah. At least when I write music, I always try to think about who's going to perform it eventually.
I'm fortunate. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by so many like other talented musicians that I could just go ask and be like, hey, can you play my piece? That's basically what happened to like a string quartet that I wrote. I was just like to a group of friends, hey, do you want to play this? And they were like, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll get no for an answer, but like that's also totally fine. You can always like move on and ask more people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the fun questions then. So our first question, well, Andy wrote this question, but do you prefer
Or
Mhm.
or you could do like the
No, I'm
this
also
one.
curious. Do you like Sibelius better or finale? Because I know a lot of people, actually almost everyone uses Sibelius, but because our composition teacher, like Wu Lao Shi, he made us download finale, so I've just been using finale.
It's
Oh.
true. Finale is like ancient, and a lot of people, I think, a lot of people are actually using Dorico now, which is
Oh.
like a newer
Mhm.
newer software that like is more like geared towards new music. Like the thing is like with Finale, you have to like break the software on purpose to like be able to do what you want to do.
Mhm.
Like if you've ever tried to do like mixed like complex meter like 7/8 + 2/4, it's like a nightmare, and you have to like pretend like a measure doesn't exist and do all this like
Yeah, you have to like do it on the
uh,
next measure and then paste it back.
yeah, so I mean, I think it's the same with Sibelius. Like, you kind of
Yeah.
have to like they're not necessarily built to do a ton of non-standard things. A lot of them is built are built in, but then it's like still kind of awkward. I do use Finale, just because I'm used to it. I used to use MuseScore actually before I got into college. I like exclusively used MuseScore, which I don't even know how that happened, but
Yeah.
yeah, so neither. Dorico is probably the answer, but I'm not going to change. Not yet.
Okay,
No,
the funny
I
thing,
wrote
yeah,
yeah.
Andy.
Yeah, I wrote this question because I use Sibelius and Lucy uses Finale. And
Yeah.
just this summer at Brevard, I had this long argument with this guy about like whether or not Sibelius was better than Finale. Um, I would say both of them are terrible because like you said, they're both like really ancient and they're not suited for new music. And there was this one guy at the same summer program. He used Dorico, and he acted like a Dorico spokesperson like all the time. He would be like,
Yeah.
every time when someone would complain about their notation software, he would be like, "Hey,
The worst thing
Dorico
is
can do
that
it
everyone
better."
at Dorico thinks they're like an advertisement.
Yeah, no, because the people at Dorico used to work for Sibelius.
Yeah, I think there's no answer. Like all music software is terrible. We should just handwrite
Yeah,
things. That's the answer.
yeah, for real,
Yeah, it
for
would
real.
just take too long though.
Yeah, I
Wait,
just
also,
realized that actually like handwriting, sketching, at least for sketching, like handwriting things out is so much like more, it's like so much easier for the workflow actually, because
yeah.
what you get
Mhm.
stuck on is like how to notate something stupid and then you lose everything and you forget everything you're going to do.
Mhm.
So it's really good to at least have a map of everything handwritten or like at least on an iPad or something, and then you can kind of
Yeah.
flesh it out later.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I handwrite stuff, it just like is so much more creative.
Mhm.
But then when I don't
Right.
have time, I kind of have to just write it on
Your
finale.
brain works better when
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
manuscript paper like this.
Yeah.
Just my manuscript paper.
Oh my gosh.
Huge.
Oh my God, I have the
No, no,
same thing.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's just
How many
mine is
saves does
really
that
big.
have?
This is 26 stays.
Oh,
Wait, I have the same thing like that.
yeah.
Nice.
I do way less pre-composition than I probably should. I just like
I used to not do it at all. I used
yeah.
to just start from bar one and then like go like be like this should be next, this should be next. But then like it's honestly been like this year and last year that I started like being like maybe it's helpful so you can actually think about
Yeah.
what's happening before you do it. And like that helps you with like you can do a lot of structural and formal things with foreshadowing that are pretty interesting, or like, you know, it doesn't always have to be a linear progression, your piece. And so that helps with
Yeah.
sketching.
Mhm.
I actually met a composer
Right.
who like draws out his pieces in like graphic, like artistic representations, like,
Mhm.
and then includes them in like the performance notes of his score. It was pretty cool.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Um, on a side note, have you watched Tantricle before?
I think I've heard one of his pieces or something.
No, he
Oh,
has a series of videos where he just roasts different notation softwares.
okay, I think I've seen those videos
Yeah.
somewhere, but yeah, the notation softwares are evil. There's no solution.
All right. Our next question. Oh yeah, let's do this one. What's your favorite instrument / ensemble to write for?
Oh,
If
this
you
is a
have
good
one.
one. My favorite instrument is the bass clarinet.
Oh,
Bass clarinet is so cool. And like there's like there's like this solo piece for bass clarinet, I think by like Chen. I think it's called
Oh, I
like
love her.
Advice to a Caterpillar or something.
Yeah.
It's like wait, let me just look it up to make sure it is bass clarinet. Yeah, it's like really cool. Just bass clarinet in general, like the sound is really cool. It's like bassoon, but like meteor. You can do so many cool things with it. And so yeah, it's either that or I used to read like oboe solos in orchestral repertoire, but that's like more like classical orchestral repertoire.
yeah.
Yeah. It's either bass clarinet or percussion. Percussionists are just the best.
I love percussion. I love working with percussionists. They're
Yeah.
because as you said, they love new music. They're because most of their music was like written like after like the 1900s, around that, because
One of my favorite
that,
things
a lot of their instruments were
are, like,
invented.
yeah, well-written new music percussion parts are really cool.
Yeah.
And like it's like also a tell. It's like you can tell when people have worked with percussionists before because of the way their parts are structured and how like things make sense with their setups and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Okay, I guess another kind of the opposite question is, what is your least favorite instrument to write for?
We can cut this out later.
I don't know. I don't necessarily dislike any instrument. I feel like I feel like I'm bad at writing brass parts. Like I'm bad at writing good like low brass parts. Just because like I know a lot less about how like the mechanics of trombones and their slides and stuff work. And so like I feel like every tuba part and trombone part I've ever written is like kind of dinky. So I think like one thing I'd like to do is like to look at more like band music and like see how like they are more interesting. Like I write good trombone parts. I think just tuba in general is like I want to write something that has a tuba solo in it at some point. Just
Oh
because
wait,
like
I
Yeah.
did write something with a tuba solo in it, but I think the way I notated it was like wrong, because in real life they played it an octave lower. But then I was like, I was counting on the finale playback, which I probably shouldn't have. So it sounded really
yeah. Well, also the problem is that also it doesn't project when you're playing like higher tuba. And like any tuba solo that exists in the repertoire is like when in a very quiet section when not other people.
Yeah.
So it's hard to orchestrate.
Yeah, I've once wrote, this was like a long time ago, but I once tried writing an orchestral piece with a bass solo, like a double bass solo. I showed it to the orchestra director at my school, and he just wrote "Y" on top of the solo.
Yeah, they don't want to
like
play
Mr.
solo.
Sans or Mr. Lal.
Mr. Sans.
Oh my God, what?
My friend who was a bassist at NYO had blisters that were like so bad he had to like wrap each of his fingers and he like couldn't play.
Oh.
And he was like,
Yeah.
please, like he's like really thankful that my bass part is like a lot of rest and like barely need playing. So
Oh no, when I write for double bass, like I need the support. So
Yeah.
there's like very little rest for him. I have the opposite problem.
Yeah, well, I like really expansive chords. So like the biggest role for a bass is to like have a C extension and like play it for like a minute straight, right? Or something.
Oh my
like
gosh.
that.
That's
No,
what most of my bass part looks
yeah.
like. It's just like one note.
I wish that like all basses came with like a C extension to be. Those things are like really expensive, and but I want those extra notes
Yeah, definitely.
sometimes.
Okay,
Yeah.
also we are also just kind of curious about your experience at Columbia in general. I know a lot of our potential viewers are might be applying there or like thinking about this school. So how is the dining hall food at Columbia, and just like the general experience?
Okay, well, first of all, I know this is not like a college panel, but like I used to do some college stuff, and like what I will say is like your dream school like will not matter to you in like literally like a year from now. Like your dream school will literally mean nothing to you probably, unless you're like one of those kids that like wanted to go to Harvard since they're like 3. Like honestly, like you'll find a place wherever you go, and like it doesn't like I know like, oh, you want to go to like this like super prestigious school, but then you in the end you realize they're all just taking your money anyways. It's like literally the tuition's so high, and like like the experience you get is never as dreamy as it seems. So like what you should really do is to like try your best in your applications and like put your best like face forward, but like also just remember that like these colleges are all building a vision for what they have for their class. And so like whether or not you fit in, it's more about like what they want than it is about what you want, right? So that's like my biggest thing is to, like, don't get super caught up in like, oh, I really want to get into like this school or whatever, because like you might not get in because somebody else has like quadruple legacy, or like somebody else, you know, has gone to a private school and has been fed in, right? It's like just things like that happen all the time. And it's like, don't be too bogged down by, you know, everyone will get rejected from some schools unless you've already saved the world, and then, you know, and then you wouldn't be worrying about it anyway. Aside from that, Columbia is a good school. There's a lot of like fun traditions. I don't remember if your question was about dining hall food or just traditions in general, but dining halls are always dining halls. Columbia does say that they're the #1 dining hall. They have like the best dining in the country. I don't think that's true, but
Yeah.
there's definitely edible options. Like I will say it's not bad for a dining hall. Like you can go and eat there and you'll find something good most days.
No, because like when I went to tour Columbia, our tour guide was basically emphasizing how good the dining hall food was
They
the
will
whole
shove
time.
it down your throat. They also claim to have 24-hour dining, which is not true anymore. It used to be true, but ever since I got here, they've like, I think they've just like understaffed the dining halls, and they don't have people to work for like 24 hours. So there is not 24-hour dining. It goes until 1 a.m. if you go to the fast food place, but if you're eating fast food at 1 a.m., you probably are like, it's like shortens your lifespan.
Also, what is it like at a school in such a big city? Does it ever feel like claustrophobic sometimes?
Oh.
Because that's what I kind of felt like when I was visiting. This is just like pure
Okay.
curiosity.
Yeah, I feel the
Yeah.
same way.
So the thing about Columbia is that it's like the only New York school that has like a campus. Like if you visit NYU, there's literally, it's like literally just in like West Village, or like it's like just lower West Side, lower East Side, and like there isn't really a campus. So like if you like city environments,
Mhm.
and you like the nice thing is that like literally anything you can think of doing, you can probably find it somewhere nearby. And like subway rides are very convenient to just like, you know, you can take a subway 30 minutes and you'll be downtown, and like there's plenty of stuff to do. So that's a good thing. And like the nice thing is that, yeah, we do have a campus. It's kind of like it's like a little park in the city, and like there's like greenery and there's like space, and it's like not super loud, it's quiet, it's nice. It's like a nice haven to be in the city. But I would say like if you're not somebody who likes cities, there's not really a good reason to like choose the school. I mean, especially if you're like, if location matters and you don't like cities, then don't don't do New York City. Like there are other cities that are like more like chill, but New York City is definitely not one of them. And like if you want to, if you want it to make it worth it, you should like definitely experience a lot of things in the city here. I guess that's like a big part of our social culture, is also just like finding things to do in the city, and not necessarily like, it's different from like Vanderbilt or like one of those schools where like the social culture is like the entire campus goes out to like a football game and like everyone like does the same thing, right? It's like a little bit different in that way here.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 3 of ChordCast, and obviously thank you, Max, for taking your time to be here with us today. So everyone stay tuned for episode 4. Bye.
Thank you.